Ryan's office revenge.
I didn't cancel a $2.8 billion commitment in anger. I activated a clause. There's a difference. The bourbon wasn't spilled. It was delivered. My name is Wesley Harper. I'm 49, and I manage pension funds for veterans who serve their country. What happened at that Houston gala wasn't about disrespect. It was about measurement. 22 years ago, I walked out of the Naval Academy with a commission and a belief that honor meant something. 8 years of active duty taught me that it does, but only when it's backed by the right systems. When I transitioned to Wall Street, I brought that lesson with me. Every contract I sign, every dollar I deploy, every handshake I make, they all operate under the same principle. Trust is a tactical asset. Lose it and you lose everything. The Energy Innovation Summit was about 45 minutes in when Patricia Caldwell stepped directly in front of me. The ballroom was all Texas chrome and crystal, 400 donors, analysts, energy executives, and board members orbiting around Apex Clean Energy Corporation. She looked at my Navy suit first, then my conference badge, then my face. VIP seating is by invitation only, she said. I know, I replied. Security check-in is at the main entrance. I'm not security. She gave me that thin smile rich women perfect in finishing school. Then you're lost. I'm exactly where I need to be. She saw a man standing where she believed only energy money belonged. A small pause. Not confusion, decision. She reached for a server's tray, lifted a glass of top-shelf bourbon, and tilted it slowly over my chest. The pour was deliberate, not rage, not accident. Classification? A few guests gasped. Someone laughed too quickly. One board member looked down at his phone as if that would erase what he'd witnessed. Across the room, Shane Morrison, the incoming president, noticed and did nothing. I didn't move. I didn't wipe the stain. I let the room record it. She didn't insult me. I thought as the bourbon soaked through my shirt. She sorted me. Roger Caldwell appeared within seconds, all Texas charm, until he saw my jacket. What happened here? I met his eyes. Hospitality, I said evenly. And I wondered, if this is how they treat a stranger in public, how do they price risk in private? The thing about managing veteran pension funds is simple. These aren't day traders looking for quick returns. These are men and women who spent decades in service to something bigger than themselves. Staff Sergeant Martinez, who lost his leg in Kandahar and now needs that monthly check to cover physical therapy. Commander Thompson, who served 20 years in submarines and trusts me to make her retirement secure. Master Chief Rodriguez, who earned 3 Purple Hearts and deserves better than watching his savings evaporate because I made the wrong judgment call. They don't get second chances, so I don't either. Patriot Veterans Fund had not wired $1 yet. That part mattered. The commitment on paper was $2.8 billion. Structure, staged, performance-based over 7 years for their solar expansion project. Public praise already drafted, regulatory approvals secured, board resolutions passed. But signatures don't move money. Authorization does. And final authorization requires me in the room. I don't deploy capital early. I don't deploy remotely, and I don't deploy on reputation alone. Section 12.7 sits buried in our fund charter, page 47 of a 200-page document most people never read completely. Moral conduct standards during negotiation phase. Immediate withdrawal rights for fiduciary protection. It doesn't sound dramatic when read aloud. It isn't meant to. 3 years ago, I ignored a smaller signal. A defense contractor CEO mocking a Purple Heart recipient during a ceremony, calling him damaged goods within earshot of cameras. Dismissed it as personality conflict, closed the deal anyway. It cost us 11 months of damage control, 4 institutional partners, and a quiet erosion of trust that no performance metric fully repaired. The veteran community doesn't forget. They don't forgive easily either. Arrogance compounds faster than interest. That lesson stayed. The energy sector has always been complicated for veteran investments. Oil and gas built American prosperity, but the transition to renewables represents something bigger: energy independence, national security, job creation for communities that sent their sons and daughters to serve overseas. When Apex Clean Energy came to us with their solar expansion proposal, it wasn't just about returns. It was about building the infrastructure that makes America stronger, but infrastructure requires leadership, and leadership requires character. By the time I left the summit, the bourbon had dried into a darker stain against Navy fabric. The footage, I knew, had already been archived. Hotel security cameras don't discriminate. They record everything. Later that night, my phone lit up. Shane Morrison, Sorry about earlier. That wasn't ideal. I watched the typing indicator disappear twice before he sent it. I replied with 2 words. Information received, that's what it was. Not humiliation, not emotion. Data. In the Navy, we called it battle damage assessment. After every engagement, you measure what happened. What worked, what didn't, what systems held, what systems failed. You don't let emotion cloud the analysis because emotion gets people killed. I don't deploy capital into culture I haven't measured. The question wasn't whether I had been insulted. The question was whether I had just measured something expensive. 22 years on Wall Street taught me that culture flows from the top. Show me how a CEO treats people he thinks don't matter, and I'll show you how he'll treat shareholders when the cameras are off. Show me a board that tolerates disrespect, and I'll show you a board that tolerates bigger problems. The next morning, cameras were already live when I walked into their boardroom. Red indicator lights, 3 angles, internal stream, investor archive, legal record. Transparency, they called it. Roger Caldwell stood at the conference table head, posture steady, tone rehearsed. Today marks a historic transition for Apex Clean Energy, he began. We enter our next phase of disciplined growth under new leadership, disciplined. I took my seat without interrupting. The boardroom was classic Houston energy money. Mahogany that probably cost more than most people's cars, oil paintings of derricks and refineries, a view of downtown that reminded everyone who built this city. But something felt different this morning. The usual confidence was strained like a guitar string tuned too tight. First slide, leadership transition language, market confidence, strategic alignment, standard corporate theater. Then I spoke. We need to address last night. The room shifted, but only slightly. Roger didn't look at me immediately. A social misunderstanding, he said, adjusting his cufflinks. Nothing more. Craig Holloway, the CFO, lowered his eyes to the binder in front of him. He didn't turn a page. He didn't have to. Ted and I served together in different capacities. Him Army, me Navy, but we understood each other's language. When a veteran sits in silence, it usually means something. Shane Morrison leaned forward. Is this material to funding? He asked carefully. Roger answered before I did. No, I didn't correct him, not yet. A director 2 seats down opened the agreement binder. Pages rustled. He cleared his throat. Section 12.7, he read. Moral conduct standards during negotiation or closing that materially impacts fiduciary standing may trigger capital withdrawal. The room temperature dropped by half a degree. Roger gave a small laugh, boilerplate language. Ted spoke quietly. It was revised at their specific request. Silence. Several heads turned toward me. I didn't move, didn't clarify, didn't confirm in the Navy. We had a saying, never interrupt your enemy while he's making a mistake. Sometimes the best tactical move is letting someone talk themselves into a corner. Roger leaned back, confidence settling in like repetition could make it true. We're not jeopardizing a $2.8 billion partnership over optics. Optics. I watched him continue, watched him minimize, watched him double down on camera. I had not yet stated my authority. I had not yet corrected his assumption. Sometimes you don't interrupt a man while he's digging. You measure the depth. The thing about commanding a ship is that everyone always knows who's in charge. The captain's authority is visible, formal, acknowledged by every person on board. But real authority, the kind that moves markets and topples governments, often wears a quiet suit and sits in the middle of the conference table. The question was no longer whether a line had been crossed. The question was whether he would stop digging or ask how deep the hole was. Shane was the one who finally did. Wesley, what exactly is your role in final authorization? He asked it carefully. Not confrontational, not deferential. Just precise. Roger answered for me. He's here representing the capital partner. Representing? I let that word sit between us for a moment. Then I corrected him. I don't represent the capital partner. I am the managing partner authorized to release the entire commitment. The recalculation was visible, not dramatic, mathematical. Ted closed the binder in front of him. He is the sole signatory on the primary tranche, he confirmed quietly. The Patriot Veterans Fund holds 45% controlling interest contingent on his approval. No one looked toward where Patricia would be sitting if she were in the room. But everyone understood what had happened the night before. The silence stretched longer this time. You could hear the building's HVAC system cycling, the distant hum of downtown traffic 30 floors below, the soft buzz of camera equipment recording everything for posterity. Roger adjusted his posture. Then let's move forward constructively, he said. Tone smoothing into something closer to negotiation. Constructive requires acknowledgement, I replied. He held my gaze. For what exactly? I didn't raise my voice. You didn't embarrass a guest, I said. You tested a covenant that landed harder than intended, or maybe exactly as intended. Shane exhaled slowly. Roger leaned back again, reclaiming composure. We are not turning a minor social incident into structural instability. Minor. The cameras were still recording. So was I. Here's what most people don't understand about fiduciary responsibility. It's not about being offended. It's not about personal dignity or wounded pride. It's about systemic risk assessment. When you manage money for people who can't afford to lose it, every decision carries weight that extends far beyond the conference room. Staff Sergeant Martinez doesn't care about Texas energy politics. He cares about whether his monthly check clears. Commander Thompson doesn't care about boardroom dynamics. She cares about whether her retirement is secure. Master Chief Rodriguez doesn't care about social hierarchies. He cares about whether the people managing his money have the character to protect it. Character assessment isn't optional. It's operational. No activation yet. No phone call. Just a room full of people understanding at different speeds that the person they had categorized the night before controlled whether $2.8 billion ever moved. The tension had peaked, but nothing had happened. Not yet. The question now wasn't about authority. It was about acknowledgement. Roger folded his hands on the table as if that settled it. We are not destabilizing a $2.8 billion partnership over something trivial. Shane shifted in his seat. His mouth opened slightly, then closed. He looked at me, then at Roger. It may not be trivial, he said carefully. Roger cut him off. It was a social error, he said. Nothing structural. I watched Shane retreat into silence. That told me more than his words would have. Intent isn't the clause trigger, I said. Impact is. Roger shook his head once. You're overpricing a social error. No, I replied evenly. I'm pricing a governance risk. Across the table, Ted's phone lit up briefly. He glanced down, pre-market indicators already reacting to early chatter. Markets are sensitive to uncertainty. More sensitive to culture than most executives admit. Roger didn't notice or chose not to. I placed my phone face up on the table, not as threat, as clarity. No one spoke. The cameras were still live. I gave them one final opening. Tell me why I should believe this won't happen again when the cameras are off. Silence settled in layers. Roger leaned back. You're making this bigger than it needs to be. No acknowledgement, no correction, no accountability. I turned to Shane. He held my gaze for half a second, then looked down at the table. That was the moment. Not the bourbon, not the clause, the silence. I reached for my phone. If no one in the room was willing to draw the line, would I? The weight of that decision sits differently when you're responsible for other people's futures. Every dollar in the Patriot Veterans Fund represents someone's service, someone's sacrifice, someone's trust. Master Chief Rodriguez didn't earn 3 Purple Hearts, so his retirement could subsidize corporate arrogance. Commander Thompson didn't spend 20 years underwater so her pension could fund leadership that tolerates disrespect as standard operating procedure. No one answered my question. Roger adjusted his tie. We are not issuing a public apology over this, he said. There's nothing to apologize for. Minimize, reframe, control the narrative. That footage can be contextualized, he continued. We can clarify intent. He was still arguing motive. The clause never mentioned motive. In my early Navy days, I served under a captain who taught me something crucial about command decisions. He said, Harper, the moment you stop making decisions based on what's right and start making them based on what's convenient, you've lost your ship. 22 years later, I understood what he meant. I waited. 1 second, 2, 3, just long enough for the silence to become uncomfortable. Then I picked up my phone, activate section 12.7. I said, not raised, not sharp, precise. Across the table, Ted's posture changed before anyone else reacted. He knew what that sentence meant operationally. Roger gave a short laugh. You're posturing. I didn't look at him. I don't posture, I said. I document. On the other end of the line, my general counsel confirmed receipt. Sarah Lawson had been with our fund for 8 years. Former JAG officer, who understood both military protocol and fiduciary law. Her voice was steady, professional. Section 12.7 activation confirmed. Drafting formal notice now. Do you want immediate suspension or standard 48-hour notice period? Immediate suspension of capital commitment pending review, I replied. Understood. Full withdrawal or staged reduction? Full withdrawal. Effective immediately, I added. Notice will be filed within the hour. Board notification simultaneous with SEC disclosure. I ended the call. No dramatics. No slammed phone. Just quiet. For a moment, nothing happened. The room inhaled and held it. Roger leaned back, folding his arms. "You're not going to tank a $2.8 billion structure over optics," he said. Ted's phone buzzed. He didn't need to check it. He already knew. The primary tranche of suspension had been logged in the system. Roger still believed this could be contained. Still believed authority lived at the head of the table. Still believed that 24 hours from now, this would be a footnote in some lawyer's file. The cameras were still recording. The capital was no longer committed. The question now was simple. How long does it take for $2.8 billion to disappear? In the modern financial system, money moves at the speed of light. Electronic transfers, algorithmic trading, real-time market data flowing through fiber optic cables at 186,000 miles per second. But institutional decisions, the kind that move entire markets, those still happen at human speed. Phone calls, meetings, conference calls with lawyers and accountants, and risk management committees. 36 hours, that was all it took. Ted's phone vibrated first. Short, contained sound against polished wood. He glanced down. Primary tranche suspended. Roger didn't miss the movement. "That's procedural," he said quickly. "Temporary." Ted didn't respond. A second vibration. This one longer, he looked again. His face went pale. Withdrawal notice executed. The words seemed to drain color from his face before they reached the rest of us. Around the table, other phones began to light up. One, then three, then nearly all of them. Assistants texting, legal calling, investor relations asking for clarification that didn't exist. The thing about modern corporate governance is that everything is connected. When a major institutional investor pulls $2.8 billion from a deal, it doesn't happen in isolation. Credit agencies get notified. Banking partners get nervous. Other investors start asking questions. The dominoes don't fall all at once, but they fall in sequence, and each one hits harder than the last. On the wall-mounted screen behind Roger, a small ticker began to refresh. Pre-market indicators shifting. -8%. A pause. -10%. Another pause. -12%. No one spoke for several seconds. Shane leaned toward me, voice low. "Is there still a path to reverse?" I kept my eyes on the screen. "Clauses don't include regret." That's the thing about serving in the military. You learn that some decisions are irreversible. When you commit troops to battle, when you launch missiles, when you make the call that puts lives at risk, you don't get to take it back because you changed your mind. You live with the consequences. Fiduciary responsibility works the same way. When you decide that leadership character is fundamentally compromised, when you determine that institutional culture presents systemic risk to stakeholder value, when you conclude that the people managing the company cannot be trusted with other people's money, you act decisively, completely, without reservation. Roger stood abruptly. "This meeting is adjourned." The lead independent director didn't move. "No," he said. "Governance discussion required." Roger stared at him. "You can't be serious." The director folded his hands. "We are past optics." The cameras were still live, red lights blinking. What had begun as transparency now looked like exposure. Roger's authority had not vanished, but it had fractured. Phones continued to vibrate. The quiet kind of panic, the expensive kind, settled into the room. No shouting, no theatrics, just consequence. The capital was gone. The market was reacting. The board had a decision to make. Would they protect the chairman or the company? The answer came faster than anyone expected. A motion was introduced without drama. Administrative leave for the board chair pending governance review. Roger laughed once. Short, disbelieving. "You're reacting to market noise," he said. "This is panic." No one answered. A director to his left hesitated before raising his hand. Another kept his hand down. Abstention. That detail mattered. This was not unanimous moral condemnation, but it was calculation. Votes were counted. The motion carried by a narrow margin. Roger's authority didn't collapse. It narrowed, then snapped. Shane's pending appointment was placed on hold pending review. Markets were now down 15%, and the number appeared on 3 separate screens almost simultaneously. Roger looked at me across the table. "You've destabilized us." I met his eyes. "You destabilized yourself." No one flinched. No one objected. There was no shouting, no dramatic exit, no security escort. Just language, procedure, removal. The cameras captured the transfer of authority in real time. Roger remained seated for a moment longer, as if refusing to stand would preserve something intangible. It didn't. A company does not implode when leverage evaporates. It compresses, it recalculates, it exposes the fault lines that were already there. The chair was vacant, the capital was gone, the board was fractured. The question was no longer about culture, it was structural. What does a company look like when leverage evaporates? The market opened at 9:30. By 9:42, the decline was no longer speculative. By noon, the stock was down 15%. Not collapse, compression. Analysts moved quickly. Governance instability, leadership credibility risk, investor withdrawal linked to cultural miscalculation. Credit agencies flagged review status within hours. Institutional investors paused secondary commitments. Banking partners requested updated exposure models. The capital vacuum wasn't loud. It was measurable. I didn't celebrate. There's nothing satisfying about structural correction. Only necessary. The energy sector is complicated for veteran investments. Oil and gas built American strength, but the future belongs to independence. Solar, wind, nuclear. These aren't just environmental choices. They're national security imperatives. Energy independence means never having to send young Marines to die protecting someone else's supply lines. When the Patriot Veterans Fund considers investments, we don't just look at returns. We look at legacy. What kind of country are we funding? What kind of leadership are we empowering? What kind of future are we building for the next generation of service members? Character matters because consequences compound. By late afternoon, my phone lit up again. Shane Morrison. I should have said something. I read it twice before responding. You had the microphone. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again, then nothing. Silence is rarely neutral. In boardrooms, it aligns with power. In markets, it prices risk. In culture, it signals tolerance. The cameras had been on. The claws had been clear. The numbers had moved. What had not moved was accountability until it was forced. The company would survive, most do, but leverage had shifted. Authority had been recalibrated, and the cost was visible on every screen in the country. 3 weeks later, Shane asked to meet. No cameras, no board, no microphones blinking red in the corner. Just a conference room overlooking downtown Houston, the city that built itself on energy and now had to rebuild itself on different principles. Shane arrived alone. No counsel, no assistant. He didn't sit at the head of the table. That detail didn't escape me. You could have warned me. He said. I did, I replied. When she lifted the glass, he exhaled through his nose. That was a social error. It was a governance event. He looked at me as if I had translated something he preferred to leave abstract. You really believe a moment like that justifies structural damage? I believe moments like that reveal structural risk. He didn't argue immediately. He adjusted his cuff instead. A habit, control through movement. Will the capital return? He asked finally. Not under the current structure. The words weren't sharp. They were final. He leaned back in his chair and stared at the window for several seconds. This wasn't about apology. It wasn't about public relations. It was about structure. He understood that now. The board had appointed him interim chairman. Patricia Caldwell had issued no public statements, but private sources indicated she blamed the incident on misunderstanding and market overreaction. Roger had retained counsel and was reportedly considering litigation against the fund for breach of fiduciary duty. None of that changed the mathematics. You've made your point, Shane said quietly. No, I answered. The market did. The energy transition is happening with or without Apex Clean Energy. Solar installations are accelerating. Wind farms are multiplying. Nuclear renaissance is beginning. The question isn't whether America will achieve energy independence. The question is whether we'll do it with leadership that understands accountability. Veterans don't invest in companies. They invest in character. They invest in leaders who understand that authority comes with responsibility, that power comes with accountability, that respect isn't earned through position but through conduct. Master Chief Rodriguez didn't serve 3 tours in Afghanistan, so his retirement could fund arrogance. Staff Sergeant Martinez didn't lose his leg in Kandahar so his pension could subsidize disrespect. Commander Thompson didn't spend 20 years underwater, so her savings could be managed by people who sort human beings like inventory. The room was quiet when we stood. No handshake, no hostility, just consequence. What costs more, arrogance or removal? It was never about bourbon. Bourbon evaporates, stains fade, footage archives. What remains is classification. Who belongs, who doesn't, who is assumed powerful, who is assumed service staff. That night, Patricia Caldwell saw a man standing where she believed only energy money belonged. She acted accordingly. The board acted accordingly. The market acted accordingly. Sorting is rarely loud. It is quiet, reflexive, cultural. It happens in glances, in pauses, in laughter that arrives too quickly, and in silence. Silence is the most expensive form of agreement. The clause did not punish insult. It enforced structure. Capital is not emotional. It does not bruise. It reallocates. She thought she sorted me. She sorted her board. She sorted her leverage. The moment the glass tilted, the outcome was already in motion. Not because I was offended, because I was observing. If you humiliate someone you assume is powerless, you eventually humiliate your shareholders. Capital does not tolerate that. Markets do not debate dignity. They price it. Governance is not about avoiding embarrassment. It is about preventing predictable risk. What happened in that ballroom was predictable. What happened in the boardroom was procedural. What happened in the market was mathematical. There was no revenge, no spectacle, only consequence. She thought it was a glass of bourbon. It was priced at $2.8 billion. The veteran community doesn't forget. More importantly, they don't forgive institutions that forget them. 22 years managing their money taught me that trust is the only currency that matters. Lose it, and you lose everything. Character is the foundation of capitalism. Without it, markets become casinos, and leadership becomes performance art. The bourbon dried. The stain faded. The lesson remained. When you control other people's money, every decision you make is a promise to someone who can't afford for you to be wrong. The most expensive mistake in business isn't losing a deal. It's funding character you haven't measured.